Lord dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory. I want to stick on dwelt for a minute because this is an interesting word when we read it. It just sounds like he was here, but we're reading it 2,000 years after the fact, and that's not what it would have sounded like to those that day. This to me is a very interesting piece of Greek. You will not find this word again in the New Testament until the book of Revelation. And then it's a bunch of times in the book of Revelation, which is interesting to me. Paul doesn't talk about dwelt. Peter doesn't talk about dwelt. John never again talks about dwelt. Seems like a common word. It's like it would be everywhere. Anywhere you talk about maybe the Spirit dwells or he dwells in us. No. But in Revelation, whenever we start getting into Jewish temple imagery, we get the word again. In fact, it's 5 times in the book of Revelation, the same Greek word for the word dwelt. Now I'm not going to go all through all the Revelation text, but I find that very interesting that we don't hear a lot about the dwelt. And why is that? This is a very Jewish phrase, very familiar to a Hebrew audience. They needed to see Christ first and foremost through the imagery of Moses. That's important. If they don't see Jesus first through the imagery of Moses, they can't trust that he's from God, because the covenant they're dwelling under is the Mosaic covenant. So Jesus has to come born of a woman, born under the law. It's necessary he's born under the law. That way Jesus can confirm himself to a Jewish audience. So look at Leviticus chapter 9 and verse 23. Moses and Aaron went into the tabernacle of meeting and came out and blessed the people. Catch the word tabernacle, because the word tabernacle used in this text is that building that Moses is instructed to set up in the wilderness, in which God would dwell over the Ark of the Covenant. When God moved, remember the fire by night, smoke by day, fire by night, cloud by day, fire by night. When the cloud moved or the fire moved and then went over here, they were to come and pick the tabernacle up and carry it over to the fire, and then God would rest over it. So the tabernacling of God is God dwelling among his people. Keep this in mind. God's not dwelling in his people in the Old Covenant. He's dwelling among his people. He can't dwell in his people. He has to redeem his people. He has to purchase his people. The Word becomes flesh to do something. The Word becomes flesh for that big tabernacle word. That word you read in John 1:14, and the Word was made flesh and dwelt among us. It's the Hebrew equivalent of the Word was made flesh and tabernacled amongst us. What would this look like? Moses and Aaron went into the tabernacle of meeting. They came out and blessed the people. And then the glory of the Lord appeared to all the people. And fire came out from before the Lord and consumed the burnt offering and the fat on the altar. And when all the people saw it, they shouted and fell on their faces. Notice whenever we are introduced to the tabernacle and the fire falling on the altar, we're introduced to the glory of the Lord. And what happens when they see the glory of the Lord? They shout and they fall on their faces. Don't equate this with they shouted excitedly. Okay? They don't shout excitedly. They shout out of fear and fall on their faces. How could they not? They just watched fire come out of nowhere and consume a sacrifice until there was nothing left. They're not in awe. In fact, they go into massive sin right after this in the next few chapters of the book of Leviticus, because there's a fear that comes over them that is associated in their minds with the glory of the Lord. Because here's what Israel thinks. If God shows up in glory, we're scared to death. Now, do we know this for sure? Well, every time an angel shows up in the Old Testament, people are falling on their face, hoping God doesn't kill them. Every time the glory of the Lord enters a room in the Old Testament, people are freaking out. They're in fear and trembling because they equate glory with he's so holy and I'm so unholy that I don't need to stand in his presence. In fact, I used to say that. I used to say, boy, I'll tell you what, if the glory of God were to come in this room like it was at the book of Acts, all that foolishness people have got going on, that would be over with. You'd fall on your face in front of an almighty God. And really all I was doing was describing the God that, or the way Leviticus describes God, prior to the Word becoming flesh and dwelling amongst us. Because when Leviticus is written, the Word hasn't become flesh and dwelt among us. There's no man named Jesus. God is dealing with us tabernacle, and the tabernacle's mobile. It's moving everywhere. God gets unhappy with what's going on here. Boom, picks up and moves. Israel moves with him. Glory of the Lord falls. Everybody falls on their face, shouts, screams. Let's start the process all over again. Word becomes flesh and tabernacles among us was John's way of saying God wrapped himself up in human flesh, or as I like to say, God wrapped himself in an earth suit and became a man. He put on the form of a man so that he could be the tabernacle for us. And look at John 1:14 again, because watch what happens when you see a tabernacle. The Word became flesh, it tabernacled among us, and what happens? We beheld his glory. That glory was of the only begotten of the Father. That glory is full of grace and truth. So what happened in Leviticus? Tabernacle is set up, fire comes down, that's called glory, everybody falls on their face. What happens in John 1? Jesus shows up. I know he's not called Jesus here. We're getting to that. We know where we're going because we've read John over and over and over again. But the Word became flesh and tabernacled amongst us. It was literal. When John writes this is risky because what John is saying is in Jesus, we saw a living, breathing, moving, walking, talking, living, dying tabernacle. The presence of God was on this man. He was a cloud by day and a fire by night. And we looked at his glory. Well, what happened when we looked at his glory? Well, if in Leviticus we should have all fell down on our faces screaming and crying. We didn't do that with this man. We didn't fall down on our faces screaming and crying when we met this man.